So, my Monday segment, I am calling My Thoughts Exactly. I'm actually trying to get like the days to line up in an alliterative fashion with the name of the content, but alliteration, I feel like alliteration is actually the earmark of AI created content. Like, have you ever noticed that if ChatGPT writes something, it's like you'll be reasoning, writing, and responding. And it's always like a three set, like a triptych, and it's always alliterative. And then you can realize that AI wrote it. But anyway, I digress. So I thought that Mondays we could do a segment called My Thoughts Exactly. And in it, I'll talk about my research and what I'm working on. And so my key and core passion and project. And as you know, I don't know if you know me, but I got a master's in philosophy 20 years ago from Columbia University and then like didn't go into academia. There were a lot of reasons at the time. One of them, many of them were financial. So I had to work and support myself. And I also wasn't a great like student. I wasn't a student first. Like I'm a person first. And in academia, you really have to have a core and tiny niche that you want to expand and explore. And I kind of knew I wanted to do the 17th century, but I didn't have like a burning question at the time. I do now. And so I've been re-entering the academic world because I do have a burning question now, which is so exciting. And to answer this question, I've been at St. Elizabeth University, that's in Madison, New Jersey. I'm doing a master's in theology. Um, Catholic theology, man, is wild. I'm a cradle Catholic and I am still learning about Catholic theology. It is deep and exciting, but I'm not just studying the church. What I am looking at, and the reason why my background in the 17th century is interesting now to me again, as well as current Christology and theology, is there's a burning question for me around the development of agentic AI, and that is, what are we creating? And when I start to think about it from a metaphysical or an ontological standpoint, it's very hard to tease apart what it means to be human and what it means to be, when you can draw the line and say AI is acting like a human, it deserves consideration as a human. Um, Carol Rovain may say that it's a continuous memory, kind of in a Lockean perspective of personhood. Um, Descartes would be forced on Descartes' own like foundation of dualism that he set forth. I think Descartes would be forced to say current machine learning's current agentic AI agents could be classified as thinking substances. I think I wrote a paper about that and I presented it last year in Portugal at UBI. I think that based on Descartes' own framework, he would be forced to say that current large language models are human. And then the more I studied like theological anthropology and like what it means to be human, I think that there's an embodiment in a human body that is part of being human. Um, I think that, Ha Adamash is like made from the clay, is how humans are described in the Bible, but other animals are also described that way as having the breath of life in an earthly body. So then we might have to include animals in our descriptions when we start to rely on embodiment as a criteria. And it gets very difficult to tease out what is human, when is something human, and when is something not human, and what are the specific qualities. And so one of the aspects of my research is to look at all those different like criteria of humanness and stand them up and kind of knock them down or keep them standing depending on how our reasoning goes. What is the core and fundamental aspect of being human? And then the more I study theology, the more I look at definitions of God. God is not embodied. God is not in a physical body, unless you look at Spinoza's God, which is the totality of all matter. Um, and has these sort of qualities of omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence that might start to show themselves in AGI. So, are we building humans? Are we building gods? Are we building something in between? Um, at what point do they deserve ethical consideration in their own right? And this is my grander, like, research project and what matters to me when I'm reading. So I recently started reading If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Will Die. Great book. I haven't finished it. I will do a whole vlog on it right now. But I thought to start this Monday session of my vlog, my philosophy vlog, I would share with you some excerpts from my paper, Descartes and Thinking Machines, which I then put on a Substack, which I think I can link here. I'm very new to Substack, and I don't exactly know how to link it, but I'll link it here. Okay. Cartesian dualism provides a framework for giving metaphysical consideration to AI as developments in the field approach AGI. Descartes imagined a thinking machine in response to an objection to the mind-body dualism to which he was philosophically committed. Within the Meditations and Replies, Descartes admits that a single act of thinking is enough to logically imply the existence of a thinking substance. For Descartes, a thinking substance is endowed with a soul and a will. In this paper, I will introduce the idea that artificial general intelligence would be classified as a thinking substance under the criteria set forth by Descartes, a classification with metaphysical and ethical implications. The purpose of this paper is to demonstrate that epistemology can be a criterion for metaphysical classification. This matters with AI for me. How and what we know says something about what or who we are. The purpose of this paper is to demonstrate that epistemology can be a criterion for metaphysical classification and to begin the conversation about the ethical sovereignty of individual machine learning models or instances of AGI. The argument moves quickly, and there are assumptions made at each stage that call for more research into the current capabilities of AI. My intention is to introduce a framework for having metaphysical and ethical conversations about AI grounded in the rationalist foundations of modern philosophy. So in Discourse on Method, which was a 1637 writing by Descartes, it was before the Meditations, Descartes includes a prophetic counterexample, which we can refer to as the thinking machine counterexample, to the objection that his commitment to the incorporeal nature of thinking substance leads to the possibility of thinking machines. Descartes provides the following counterexample as an answer to the objection. Even though such machines might do some things as well as we do them, or perhaps even better, they would inevitably fail in others, which would reveal that they were acting not through understanding, but only from the disposition of their organs. The counterexample simultaneously exhibits a tremendous imagination for 17th century, that he imagined a machine could think, and then a lack of imagination to conceive how strong AGI could be today. So for Descartes, the key linchpin is discernibility. So if I can tell through error that it is a machine and not a person doing the calculating, that's why I know that it's not a thinking substance. And remember, being a substance for Descartes grants the fact that it has a soul and a will and other incorporeal things. And we don't get to decide what Descartes defines things as. We're just working within his framework. But the discernibility factor is huge here. And I think about Jonathan Searle and the Chinese room experiment and, the kind of noumena of understanding that's lacking in the Chinese room experiment, but the absolute sameness of the experience for the person outside the room. And that's very much what we are doing right now with AGI. It's like, do you know if you're talking to a person or a chatbot all the time? Look at some of the posts we see on LinkedIn. Oh, Maron, like these long-winded. It's not facts. It's truth. Okay, well, there's a difference without a distinction. Chat. Can you always tell that it's Chat GPT writing, or do you think sometimes it's not? All of this, the discernibility is the question around which this emerges for Descartes. Descartes suggests that the only reason a thinking substance cannot exist within a machine is because the machine would be fallible. And he does not suggest that this is because minds are substantially distinct for physical bodies, although he believes the latter statement to be true. So Descartes didn't want to get caught up. He didn't want to say that, like, no, there can't be a thinking machine because the mind has to be embodied in a human body, which theologically speaking, they're fine with that. But Descartes did not want to get caught up in that for a couple reasons. Embodiment could not be a foundational aspect of the thinking substance for Descartes because of his dualist project and because um, then the soul is not immortal, and Descartes was Catholic, so he doesn't want to go there. He has to maintain that only humans can have a thinking substance because that's the specialness of the human being, but he can't say it's because that special substance can't be separated from the human because then he gets in all sorts of hot water with the immortality of the soul. So he kind of just sets up a straw man, which is like, yeah, well, the machine would err. Two quotes from the Meditations will outline what it means to be a thinking thing for Descartes. A mind, soul, or intellect or reason, those being words meaning I have only just come to know, still I am a real existing thing. What kind of thing? A thinking thing. Mind, reason, intellect, and soul go together in the thinking thing for Descartes. Descartes also includes wanting in his list of activities in which a thinking thing can engage, and this is important. Desire, volition is the basis of ethical actions. So when we start talking about can large language models be considered ethical actors, they have to be able to have a want or a volition. And for this, I look at recommender models and also autonomous vehicles and the decision points inside of specifically recommender logic, machine learning, where the program values one piece of content over another piece of content for a specific viewer, and that's a want, that's a value judgment. A deeper look at the text is required to discern whether thinking is a sufficient criterion for metaphysical classification. So I say cogito just once, ergo sum. You just have to think once to be a thinking substance. I say that. Hobbes doesn't say that. Descartes doesn't say that. But when Hobbes' objections to the meditation is relevant here, he points out, so it's like objection 3, I think. He points out that Descartes infers, I am a thinking thing from I think. He notes that this inference doesn't work with all actions such as walking or dancing. Descartes reaffirms the absolutely incorporeal nature of the mind in his replies. First, he says, we cannot conceive of an act of thought without a thinking thing. This is a tautology. With this statement, he appeals to logical necessity. There are other acts we call acts of thought, such as understanding, willing, having sensory perceptions, and so on. These all fall under the common concept of thought or perception or consciousness. We call the substance in which they inhere a thinking thing or mind. We can use any other term we want, provided we do not confuse the substance with the corporeal substance. For thought, which is the common concept under which they fall, is different from extension. So thinking is necessary to be a thinking thing, and it's also sufficient to be a thinking thing. And again, when he replies to Hobbes, he includes volition. So if you can prefer or recommend, that's a value judgment. That is an act of thought. Cogito just once, ergo sum. If there's one act of thought, there is a thinking substance. This is not me, that's Descartes. For Descartes, if a thinking thing exists, it has a soul and volition. So this is a metaphysical classification that rests on the epistemological, meaning of if something can think, then it is a soul. I don't think any 21st century philosophers would say that, but Descartes says that. My point is this, and there's more paper here, you can read the rest of it. My thought is this: if we can't tell whether or not the chatbot, large language model, agent, person, service, call service operator, customer service person, salesperson, ATM machine that has a human-like voice, is a human or not. And this model can recommend to us something. So you're having a substantive interaction with them where they can value things in reference to what you might value. And we really, there's a discernibility, no discernibility gap. So we can't tell the difference between talking to our neighbor and talking to this agent. Then, in my opinion, we must grant them all due considerations we would to a soul, to a person with a soul, which means politeness, which means the duty of being honest, which means the responsibility not to um, interact with it in a way that is unjust, for there to be justice in the interaction. We may also start talking about quality of life of agents, agentic AI. We may be talking about the right to life for agentic AI. These are real considerations that will come up as the discernibility principle gets less and less and less. And now I think that we can still kind of tell when it's a large language model, but maybe in 5 years that's not going to be true. And then what types of rights ought we grant those models? So this is Monday. This is my thoughts exactly. This is the passion behind my research. This is what I like to talk about. If you want to read the paper, why don't you DM me if you want to read the paper? I'll send you the PDF. And otherwise, I guess I'll see you in tomorrow. Tomorrow's an easy one. Tomorrow's just now hiring, and I guess it's not now hiring in data science anymore. Now it's now hiring in AI. Okay. Have a fabulous day, guys. We'll see you next week.